She is a certified master results coach, trainer speaker, and a recent author. And she's the owner of Harmonize Coaching in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Trish helps professionals and executives who have been thrown off track by hardship to create positive, productive, resilient, and balanced life, resulting in achieving goals, self-confidence, success, and joy. Her specialty is coaching through adversities, whether it's an executive or professional dealing with illness, loss, life balance, work-related dysfunction, or an organization or team wanting more engagement and productivity. She helps to create success. Trish has a deep personal experience with powerful recovery from adversity, including traumatic losses, breast cancer, layoffs, dysfunctional bosses and teams, and business crisis. And she's also certified in team coaching and focuses on building strong cross-functional leaders and productive teams. She has 25 years of mentoring and coaching experience as a leader in the corporate and nonprofit worlds. She was a successful leader at Target for 20 years, as well as in other organizations like Limited Express and Trimble. And she combines her successes as a corporate leader, a powerful coach and entrepreneur, and an adversity survivor to deliver unparalleled results for her clients. Just last week, she was announced as Best Coach in Minneapolis. So welcome, Trish. We're so proud and excited to have you present today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am actually going to share my screen. The screen's gonna go on and off as we talk. And Kim, you have the questions, correct?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions I have for you today.
All right. Okay. So let me start by sharing my screen. So it's kind of a strange topic, breast cancer in business, but this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So, you know, in talking to Kim and talking to Scott, we talked about really how breast cancer and business kind of combined for me. So what I am going to ask of you is this: to be open, honest, and curious, to consider the alternatives, and then to commit to one thing out of the presentation. If anyone knows the 70-90 rule, it's that within 24 hours, if you're not committed to something, if you don't take notes, if you're not doing something with the presentation, within 24 hours, you'll lose 70% of the material. And within a week, you'll have lost 90% of the presentation. So if you don't want to waste an hour, I would suggest that you commit to one thing out of this. So with that, Kim, I will let you take it away.
Well, I think the best way to start is for you to share your incredible story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna take I'll put the screen up and down. I would rather see y'all as we're talking rather than just you seeing my presentation. So this is actually the 10th anniversary of me being cancer-free. And what I'll tell you is that breast cancer saved my life. It sounds strange, but it saved my relationships, my physical and mental health, and my career. And so I consider myself a thriver and not just a survivor. So let me give you a little bit of context for that statement, because I know it sounds really strange. The first thing that you should know that my father was a very highly decorated full colonel in the Army. He was in World War II and Korea, and he treated his children like they were his troops, if that makes any sense. So he had extremely high expectations, and if you didn't meet those, number one, there was hell to pay. But number two, if you did meet them, he would just raise the bar again so that you wouldn't become complacent. So what came out of that is that I learned to be a hyperachiever and a perfectionist, because that is what he expected. So that's really kind of what led my life. That and the fact that vulnerability and weakness were synonymous as one word. So I learned never to be vulnerable. I also had an extreme fear of failure issue, as well as some pretty bad imposter syndrome. But I had this veneer of strength and confidence. So when I tell people my story, they're normally pretty surprised. So I'm going to share just for a second. So my career, just basically my life was very different 30 years ago. So this is my career track. So I was with Gauchos Maison Blanche, which was a small department store down in Louisiana. Then I went to Limited Express. I spent 20 years at Target as a corporate leader. I was hard driving. I was a corporate ladder climbing leader. And on average, I worked 80 hours a week. And my thought back then was, if I could control everything, my life would be perfect. But, what can go wrong with that? Well, first of all, you can't control everything. And the second thing is that perfection is not real. So I wasn't only trying to control my work, but I was also trying to control my family. So my kids, my husband, and I didn't realize at the time, but it was really hard on them. Let me give you an idea. Most nights, my husband would show up at work at 6 o'clock with the kids in tow with a bag filled with dinner. We would have dinner at my office. The kids would play with toys that I had for them. Then they would leave and he would put them to bed. And that was our life day after day. 80 hours a week at Target, and then my kids seeing me at Target and not at home except for on the weekends. So you can imagine how hard that was on them. So I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm really very loyal to Target. And then in 2009, what happened, the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, and I was laid off with 1,500 other people. So Target was my identity. And my first thought, remember I told you I had this imposter syndrome? My first thought when I got laid off was, see, they found me out. I'm not as good as I thought I was, and so they laid me off. In fact, that wasn't the truth, but that was what was in my mind. So in 2010, I started with a technology company and hated my job. I was even more stressed than I was at Target, and my physical and mental health took a huge hit. So in 2012, the universe decided they were going to send me a pretty strong message. So in 9 months, from July 2012 through March of 2013, my life was turned upside down. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had a double mastectomy. 6 weeks later, I went back to work, and this is what my boss said to me. Wow, it must have been really nice to have 6 weeks off and do nothing but watch TV and read books. I could not believe it. And I wanted to quit right then and there, but I was having another surgery in January, so I couldn't. So went back to work, still hating my job, but I was doing my job. 2 weeks later, I got a call that my father, who was 91 years old, was in emergency brain surgery. So he got out of brain surgery, and we realized that dementia had come in during the surgery. So I was in Chicago a week out of every month to nurse him back to health. And then we had to put our dog down. So now my life had become a country song. And then what happened next was that I was having my surgery, so second surgery. So that should be fine, right? Well, 5 days before that, I got a phone call. And that phone call was that my sister was going into emergency surgery because she had stage 4 malignant melanoma. I had my surgery, quit my job right then. And really, that's what I have to thank my boss for, because if he hadn't been such an idiot telling me that it must have been nice to have 6 weeks off, I likely wouldn't have quit. So I was able to quit, had my surgery, went to be with my sister, and she died 8 weeks later. So that was my life over a 9-month period. And I didn't know what to do. I was devastated, as was my family. So I took 2 years off to do critical caretaking of my dad and of my family. So that's my story.
That's a lot. But I'm really curious, how did breast cancer save your life?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and it lies with the conversation that I had with my son. So he was about 22, and we were sitting at the kitchen table and we were talking. This is the quote from him. He said, "You know, Mama, I'm really lucky. I've had 2 moms, a corporate badass mom and a Zen mom." Now, of course, he only had 1 mom. I had scars to prove it. So I asked him to clarify. And he started by saying, you know, growing up, you were a corporate badass mom. We learned things like work ethic, tenacity, negotiations, how to stand up for ourselves and others. But it was really hard. Remember high school? And yeah, I remembered high school. It was one big fight for 4 years. I tried to control him. And if anyone has a teenager or has had teenagers, they push back. They don't want to be controlled. And he pushed back hard. And then he said, "But now you're a Zen mom." And I was like, "Oh, what is a Zen mom?" I just did not understand what he meant. And he said, "This is you being a Zen mom. You got cancer, you left corporate, and you became a coach. And you're sitting here talking with me, not at me. We have great long conversations, and you would have never done that as a corporate badass mom, ever." And you know what? He was right. I had changed. So I talk about the fact that I became a coach by accident and by adversity. And what I mean by that is I became a coach to prove to corporate that I had done something valuable during my 2 years of critical caretaking. Because critical caretaking wasn't enough to be valuable in my mind. That was that corporate badass mentality. So when I got, that's why I say it was by accident and adversity. So when I got my mastery in coaching, I had one less session with a woman who I thought was going to be my last client, because I was going back to corporate. I was bringing coaching back to corporate. And she was an acquaintance who had experienced a traumatic brain injury. And we had worked for months on her self-confidence and her self-worth. And in the last session, she came in, she was smiling, she was so excited. She told me she loved her new brain and that she had gone back to work in the school district. She had gotten her job back. So she also made what I thought was a tongue-in-cheek comment, which was, "I hope you know you helped save my life." And I just laughed. And I said, "Well, you know, that's what I do." And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, you don't understand. You really did help to save my life. I hated my new brain. I didn't know what to do. I had plans. And you helped me see the positive part in my new brain." And it was at that moment that I finally listened to all the messages that the universe had been sending to me. And I decided to be impactful as a coach. instead of being transactional as a corporate leader. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being a corporate leader. I loved it. I was successful at it. For me, at that point in my life, I needed to be impactful as a coach. And that's why I say that even though I became a coach through adversity and through by accident, I continue to coach through passion and purpose. So that is when my Zen journey really came together.
So you went from being a corporate leader to an entrepreneur. What was your biggest challenges in becoming a solopreneur?
You know, I love that question because when you're in the corporate, well, at least when I was in the corporate world, all I could think of was, if I could just go to work for myself, I wouldn't have to have anybody else telling me what to do. I wouldn't have to worry about this BS. I could be my own boss. This is what my biggest challenge was. First and foremost was working alone. So I loved working in teams. I loved mentoring people. And as a coach, as an entrepreneur, suddenly I'm on my own. And that was really hard. So I loved mentoring. I loved working on teams. So I kind of got my mentoring fix with working with clients because I was helping them to become who they were meant to be. So that was great. But I was still alone throughout the week. So I joined the International Coaching Federation, and I joined as the treasurer, then became president-elect, and then president. So working with a group of like-minded people gave me my team fix. And today, how I deal with that, so I'm no longer the president, you have a 2-year term. What I do is I have 2 accountability partners that I've met throughout my journeys. One I meet with at the beginning of the week, and that is when we both set our intentions for the week and our plans. And then I meet with a second person at the end of the week, and that is where my follow through comes. So when I bookend my week, I set priorities and follow through. I also joined a group called Rise. We meet once or twice a week, and this really helped to find my people and create partnerships. And that's been key to my success as a coach. So that working alone, it was the first thing that was just very different than what I thought it would be. The second, to be honest, was a cut in pay and no benefits, right? When you're an entrepreneur, you start at 0. Thankfully, I had some savings, and it got us through. But that startup in a business can be really daunting, and honestly, that's what a lot of people stop doing. They don't become an entrepreneur because they don't think they can do that. And so I actually interviewed with another coach, and the best advice he gave me was, Trish, don't just stick your toe in the water. Don't work and then be a coach on the side. If you're going to be a coach, go all in or don't go at all. So that's what I did. I went all in. And then one of the things that I did is that I joined networking. So Network in Action, I had never heard of yet. This was back in 2015 and 16. So I joined BNI, and I met a woman through BNI. I was put in touch with this woman who we were very like-minded, and she asked me if I wanted to start working with her at the University of Minnesota. So she had a contract with the University of Minnesota. I started working with her on that, and that really jumpstarted my business. And that is, I then took over the contract because she retired, and that's how my business really started. So, and then finally was fear. I mean, Kim, I know that you're an entrepreneur too, and that fear of actually taking that step, and you know, the fear showed up as excuses. So things like, you know, sales are not my thing. I hate selling myself. And at the end of the day, it was really about a fear of rejection for me. And then there were excuses like, I don't need an admin. I can do this all myself. I'm not that big. And that was both a fear of failure and success. I might not be able to pay the admin for, for working 20 hours a week, and a fear of success in that, well, I'll have further to fall if I fail after my success. So those were really the biggest three. There are additional ones, but those are the biggest ones for me.
Well, that makes sense. Now, what were your biggest wins, or what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because when I became an entrepreneur, nobody gave me any advice. Nobody talked to me about what I should do, shouldn't do. And so I kind of learned by accident, if you will. So the first thing that I did, and I would tell anyone to do, is to have really crystal clear clarity on your core values. And when I'm talking about your core values, I'm talking about only 5 to 6 of your top values. I will tell you what mine are. Mine are: number 1, love; number 2, wellness. And that wellness, I would never have said that that was a core value, but when I was laying in the hospital after having breast cancer, I realized that I might not be there for my family. So wellness became my second most important one. My third is my family. My fourth is integrity. The fifth is friends. And my sixth core value is compassion. And knowing those values, keeping those in front of me at all times, helps me make my decisions. It helps me know when something's off. You know how you get that just feeling that something's off? I can normally look back at my values and I can figure out what's off. So, so that's the biggest piece that I would say. The second is get to know your inner critic and get to know your inner champion. So, who's an inner critic? So, that voice in your head that demotivates you, that says to you things like, yeah, you really shouldn't do that. You can't do that. You know what? You've tried stuff like this before and you haven't been successful. Don't do it. It holds you back and tries to keep you safe. And it is really important to understand that your inner critic is not you, right? You weren't born with all of these negative messages. You were born with positive messages. And at no point did you ever think, oh, I can't do that, until you got into school, right? So when you hear those messages, those have been put in over a lifetime. And I'll give you an example of one for me. One of the strongest messages that my inner critic used to give me is that I was an awful writer. I couldn't write worth anything. And that came from my 5th grade teacher handing back a paper, which I thought was great. She hands it back with a frowny face on it, circled. And she says to me, Trish, you're a great artist. And you might want to stick with that because this writing thing, not so much. You're not so good at that. Now, first of all, can you imagine a teacher telling a fifth grader that? But second of all, can you imagine that student holding on to that message for over 40 years? Because that's what I did. And I just thought that I was an awful writer. And then a few years ago, I had started a new way of setting goals, and it starts with a success story. And I was writing my success story, and I looked down and I had written that I was going to write a book. It's like, I'm not writing a book. I can't write. But there it was in black and white. So guess what? I wrote a book. Even though my inner critic said, you can't do this. My inner champion said, you know what? You can do this. What they've been telling you for this long is not right. So your inner champion is that one that says, great job. You can do this. You've got this. And that's your voice. Your inner critic is not your voice. It was voices that were put into your head throughout growing up, etc. But that inner champion is your voice. And I often talk about, I'm going to just share this story. If anyone ever played shotgun when they were little, which means that you yell shotgun and you get to ride in the passenger seat. Well, what's great about that? You know, you get to sit in the front seat, you have the best view, you have the driver's ear, and you get to help navigate. So I just want you to imagine what happens if you don't know your inner critic and your inner champion. Your inner critic usually rides in the front seat with you and helps you navigate. So what you want to do, put him or her in the back seat, call your inner champion and have your inner champion ride up front with you. Let your inner champion navigate your life. And that was all learned when I went through coaching, and I wish someone would have told me that a long time ago, because my inner critic absolutely is the one who navigated my life. And then the third thing is reframe failure. So I'm going to ask you a question, and Kim, if you can look at the chat, because I would like for people to answer this. What do Viagra, Post-it notes, and bubble wrap have in common? Does anyone know? Is there anything in the chat?
All invented by mistake.
They were all
came from necessity. This is what people are saying.
So it didn't come from necessity, but what you said first was they were all through mistakes. They were failures. So Viagra was meant to be a blood pressure medication. It didn't work very well as a blood pressure medication, but there was a second outcome of Viagra, and they figured it out while they were testing it. And so Viagra has become one of the most successful drugs on the market. It's also one of the most profitable. So those of us who live in Minnesota know the story about Post-it notes, or might know the story about Post-it notes. Post-it notes were created by a scientist who was trying to make a really strong bond of glue, and he got this glue that didn't bond to anything. It stuck, but then it came right off. And so he was actually at 3M, he was called Mr. Persistent, because he kept trying to find a way to use this. Couldn't find it. One day a friend came to him and he said, remember that glue that you made? Can we try and make bookmarks? Because I sing in the choir at church and I don't want to mark up the hymnal. So could we try this? That is how Post-it notes were born. And then bubble wrap is my favorite story. There were two engineers who worked for a wallpaper company, and they were also worked with the interior decorators, etc. And back in the 50s, textured wallpaper was becoming all the rage. So they put two shower curtains in between a heat sealer, and out came bubble wrap. They made it as wallpaper. They put it on the market. They sold not one roll of bubble wrap. Can you imagine? They had all of this money sunk into bubble wrap, and nobody was buying it. So one of them took it home, and all of a sudden he heard this pop, 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 pop. His 5-year-old son was the first person to ever pop bubble wrap. So they decided, we're going to patent it. They patented it. They created a company. And in 1960, 3 years later, they got an appointment with IBM. IBM was shipping goods, and they would have huge markdowns because everything would break in transit. They wrapped the instrument in bubble wrap, dropped it on the ground, nothing happened. IBM was the first company to use bubble wrap, and it has completely changed the industry, the shipping industry, by two engineers working for a wallpaper company. So failure it's not fatal, and unfortunately that's what we think of failure. So if you reframe failure, it's one of the biggest competitive advantages that you can have in your business. So I ask people to reframe it like this, that failure is actually a natural and necessary part of the human learning experience. So failure is your biggest personal growth tool that you have. Think about babies, right? When they learn to walk, they fall, they get up, they fall, they get up. They're learning that whole time. They're failing and they're learning from their failures. So the quicker you can do that, the more of an edge you're going to have. Michael Jordan said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot, and I've missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And then finally, this is a bonus, embrace vulnerability. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by embrace vulnerability? This is the book that I just published. It's called Real, Raw, and Relatable, Corporate Badass Mom to Zen Mom. It is 52 stories of the most vulnerable parts in my life and how I overcame those. And then it's followed with questions and activities afterwards that the reader can then, my story opens it up for you. And then as a reader, you answer the questions and make it your own. What are your own stories? So if you don't think that it's vulnerable to write a book that is in front of thousands of people now, all about the stories about how I was this awful corporate badass mom, it's my favorite part, is to tell that story so that people can learn from it. So that's what I mean by vulnerability. It makes you more relatable. I'm actually going to take the blur off of my background. Can everybody see my background? If you think this would have ever been my
You're not
background,
currently. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about your screen.
No, my background. What's on the wall behind me? Can you tell?
Tree? No idea.
A tree?
Tree and a bird and leaves.
Oh, yep. And then do you know what character is sitting on the tree? That's Owl, and in the tree is Piglet. This is from Winnie the Pooh. My office is where my kids' nursery used to be. And when I took over this office, I went to go paint. And what you're not seeing is this room is 100-acre wood. So a friend of mine painted murals all over. And I couldn't paint over it. And I thought, you know what? Coaching is a lot like Winnie the Pooh. It's about believing in something that you don't necessarily know is true. I'm keeping this. And if somebody doesn't want to work with me because this is my background, because I'm not corporate enough, then I don't want to work with them. And I coach from admins up to CEOs. And this is the background that everyone sees. That is authentically who I am. And that's why I'm an entrepreneur and doing what I want to do. So, does that make sense? That vulnerability piece and making you more relatable? Cool.
I'm glad you kept Winnie the Pooh.
Me too.
That's wonderful.
Me too.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the story.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Yeah, there are two things. The first thing I want to read you is a letter that I wrote. And then finally, I want to offer everyone who's on the call a complimentary 30-minute session with me. And whether it's breaking down what those, what are your challenges? What have your wins been, etc., or however you want to use that 30 minutes, I offer that to all of you, and I'll show you how to get that in a minute. So here's a story. About 3 years after my cancer, I realized that I was mad, I was sad, and I was resentful because I had cancer. So this is my letter. Dear Cancer, as unusual as this may seem, this is a thank you letter. Do you cause pain and suffering? Yes, and I hate you for that. What you don't realize is that through all of the pain and suffering comes endless love, pure compassion, wonderful and meaningful friendships, endless kindness that's magnified beyond imagination, and an appreciation for people so deep that it's indescribable. That was never your intention, so you don't win. You took my sister, you took my friends, and you tried to take me, but you still don't win. You see, I ended up more in love, more alive, more gentle, and more appreciative. So again, you don't win. My children have seen such deep love and gratitude that they wouldn't otherwise have seen. They've experienced a way of seeing life that I couldn't teach them. So again, you don't win. You've given me wonderful opportunities like participating in the 3-day breast cancer walk with friends. We have such great memories of the fun, laughter, support, bonding, and strength that was built through the experiences. So again, you don't win. You've changed me. I'm a better mother, sister, friend, wife, and person than I was without your presence in my life. So again, you don't win. So Cancer, in a strange way, I have to say thank you. You don't win. I do.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
If any of you out there know people that are going through hardship, I think one thing that's really special about Trish is she's been everything from corporate to a solopreneur She's been through all this trauma with hardships. She's a mom. So there's a lot of people that would find her very, very relatable. And I just can't even thank you enough for being a member of NIA and to being such a special person that is making such impacts on people's lives. And I guess before we get off, does anybody have a quick question for Trish?
Got a question in the chat here from Arbra. What prompted you to write that letter?
The letter was written because I was mad, I was sad, and I mean honestly, I felt like my body had betrayed me, and I was stuck in that, and I didn't know what to do. So what I'm not telling you that I will tell you now is that I did exactly what I tell my clients to do. And the first thing I did was I wrote an FU letter to cancer. And I ranted and raved, and everything that was horrible about it, I wrote that. And then I wrote a thank you letter because out of any adversity that you have, I promise you, what is inside is a lesson to learn. Sometimes there can be great things that come out of it, and sometimes it's just a lesson, but there is something to be learned from it. Like, as an example, I wrote a thank you letter to my boss. I never sent it. I never send either letter. I always have people burn their first letter. That FU letter, you write it, you burn it. But the second one, the thank you letter, also, sometimes you might send it, but usually you don't. I sent my old boss a thank you that I never would have quit my job and spent the last 7 weeks with my sister, or the last 7 weeks of her life with my sister. And so that's the good thing that came out of, one of the good things that came out of that. So I did the same thing with my cancer letter, and I really started thinking about what all the gifts were that I had with cancer. What I didn't tell y'all is that we brought this decision on having a double mastectomy to our kids. And we were sitting in our living room and we said, okay, this is a family decision. I can get a single mastectomy or a double. And my son sat there, and he was 17 at the time, and he looked and he said, Mama, get a double. We don't want to worry about it. And besides, you know how you are about symmetry. And then so this is my 17-year-old son. And then my 15-year-old daughter says, I agree, get a double. And really, Mama, do you want one Victoria's Secret boob and one mom boob? Is that really what you want? Well, I mean, it was hysterical. So then we were able to deal with the breast cancer from a lighter, more humorous perspective than dealing with it with dread and sadness. And that's why I say there's something that always comes out of the adversity. You just have to look for it.
Yeah.
What other questions?
Nothing currently in the chat, but if anybody wants to sound off, feel free. The floor is yours. We do have a few more minutes available.
And I have put into the chat my Calendly link so that you can set up a 30-minute complimentary discovery call that works with your schedule. So that's in the chat if you pull that up.
Hi, Trish. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Trish, thank you so much for your story. It's so inspirational. I'm sitting here and I'm soaking in everything, and I'm like, wow, she is such a giant, such a strong individual. I'm so grateful that you're here to share that story with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Right. I just have one question. You mentioned impactful as a coach rather than be transactional as a corporate leader. Can you
Yeah.
go a bit deeper into that so that we
Yeah,
can, so, you know?
absolutely. So when I looked back on my corporate career and I looked at how I had impacted people, I really couldn't, I could absolutely look at the projects that I had done that really impacted Target Corporation or Express or God chose Maison Blanche or people that I mean, I had, you know, there was no shortage of that. When I really looked at how I had impacted people, it was the people that I had mentored. It was the people that I had spent time with and really talked to them about what they wanted in their life. And that was the favorite part of my job. That's what I love to do the most. So when I coached the woman who had the traumatic brain injury, I was like, you mean I could do this every single day? I could impact people every day, not just sometimes? I vote there. I vote that's where I want to go. The transactional piece was making millions of dollars for as the leader of the companies that I was with. You know, it was really very transactional. It was about how do we make more money? And I just decided at this point in my life, that's not what I wanted to do. It absolutely does not mean that that's not the right thing for other people to do, because that's what I did for over 25 years. And that's who I help, is people who are in, you know, not just corporate. I also help entrepreneurs, etc. But I help them to become more balanced, so they don't have to be a corporate badass mom like I was. They can balance their life and they can find joy. Am I answering your question?
Yes, thanks, Trish. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was clear. Thank you.
Absolutely. No problem.
All right, Trish, and I have somebody personally singing your praises in the chat from Bone Financial Group. Not sure who that is, but they say Trish has truly helped me find my confidence despite some hardship I have encountered. She comes so, in all caps, so highly recommended. So
that is from Roxy. So thank you, Roxy. I appreciate that.
All right, y'all. Well, is there anybody else that wants to chime in? Oh, we still have time? We do respect everyone's time, and I actually do owe everyone here, the few and the proud, a huge apology for the false start today. We were a little late. Mea culpa, my bad. I throw myself upon you, beg your forgiveness. And I thank you, Trish, so much for this wonderful presentation. It was great. Thank you for hanging in there.
Absolutely.
Everybody just make sure you're here next month on the first, third, and fourth Wednesday of every month, Zoom with NIA, where we'll be having our speaker series, our sales mastery courses, and of course, the network with the nation, the first Wednesday of every month. So I look forward to seeing everyone there, and we will begin promptly. I resolve to make this so. All right. Thank you again, Trish.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a
Bye, y'all.
great day. Thank you for being with us.